Mental Health Monday on Radio City Talk. Tackling the stigma.
Yeah, welcome to another edition of Mental Health Monday. My name is Mick Coyle. I do hope you're well. It is a Monday, so it's time to talk about mental health. I was away last week, so hopefully you enjoyed the conversation and the podcast as well, which is available to download via our Audio Boom page and also via iTunes. Just search for Mental Health Monday. You'll get all the information that you're looking for. My name's Mick, and my guest in the studio. I'm really pleased to see that he's here in the studio because I read about his story a couple of weeks ago now. We wanted to get him in because I think his is a story which I think will resonate with a lot of people. His name is Kristian Walsh, and he joins us on Mental Health Monday. Kristian, thank you for your time. Great to see you. Thank you for coming on board. Your story, I think, is a story which will resonate with a lot of people, although everybody has their own sort of individual story to tell. But you opened up about your own battle with mental health, which has got obviously the mindful connotations as well, but there's a very physical story that comes with yours as well. Just describe to me sort of if you want to take us back maybe 2-3 years, maybe a little bit longer, describe yourself then, if you like.
Okay, so I suppose let's go about 2 years ago. I was a big lad, you know, there's no other way of putting that. I was touching 22 stone, I had 50-inch waist, and just, I suppose, physically as well as mentally, I just wasn't really looking after myself very well, and I didn't really, you know, my quality of life was deteriorating, and, you know, I get short of breath walking upstairs, couldn't really walk many places, and you know, because of me, I realised it was sort of linked to me mental well-being as well as my physical well-being. So I just started to exercise and, you know, not to just skip forward too much and spoil it all at the start. But, you know, I'm down to pretty much under 13 stone now. I'm a 32-inch waist and, you know, feeling really good both physically and mentally.
It's an absolutely incredible physical metamorphosis you've gone through. It's unbelievable, that amount of weight. How strongly do you think those were linked? Your mental health issues that you had and your physical problems that you were having?
Absolutely loads, to be honest. I mean, I think physiologically, you know, medically, when you exercise, you release endorphins, and that makes you feel happy. So I think, you know, there's actual scientific proof of that, you know, exercise did help me in that way. But I think it was all about esteem as well. I think it's a cliche, but it's very true that you can spiral a little bit. You can certainly get into this cycle of feeling sorry for yourself, and when you feel sorry for yourself, you don't really want to do anything, and then, you know, you don't want to do anything, so you feel sorry for yourself, and so on and so on. I feel that once I got sort of out, you know, in the gym and running and just basically getting a bit of fresh air, once the weight started to fall off me, I sort of felt more confident in myself. You know, when I was the size I was, you know, I used to think that people would walk past me in the streets and would be laughing at me, and I obviously fed into the anxiety that I suffered from, you know, that led to depression. Obviously now, you know, for all I know, people may still be laughing at me, but I don't feel that it's automatically about me. I feel that, you know, I look, if you will, normal. I mean, I've got to say, I don't think there's anything wrong with being overweight. I don't feel that, you know, if someone is overweight and you're happy like that, that's absolutely fine. I think everyone should be comfortable in their own skin and be happy no matter what they are. But for me, it was something that was obviously just feeding into, you know, no pun intended, feeding into my insecurities and my fragile mental state.
Well, I was going to say, was there anything else that you felt was going on in your life or in your mind at the time? And obviously, the size of you physically was sort of an aspect of that, or is it as simple as lose the weight, feel better about yourself?
No, I don't think it was just the weight. I think even when, you know, I dropped to sort of, let's say, you know, a random figure here, 17 stone. I mean, I was still obviously then a big lad. I'd be, you know, what people class as obese or certainly vastly overweight. But it was just, I felt like I was achieving something. I was on the right path to doing something that would make me feel better. I mean, it wasn't just linked to the weight. I mean, it wasn't a case of once the weight goes, you know, it was automatically a magic wand was waved and I feel better. Because to be honest, you know, I'm below 13 stone now, but I still get those days. I still get those days where, you know, I don't want to get out of bed sometimes. But what running did for me and exercise in general is it just, you know, when you don't feel like getting out of the covers or you feel like everything's getting on top of you, you just pound the pavements for 5 miles or whatever, clears your head. It doesn't always work, but for me it's something that I could channel my feelings into. I mean, it doesn't have to be running, you know. I feel like, you know, if you want to take up knitting or writing or playing guitar, anything like that, by all means, do it. Just for me, my outlet was running and sweating out the anxiety, I suppose.
Well, I'll ask you a little bit later on about sort of the challenges that you're facing now that the weight's kind of come off you. So that as a particular aspect, obviously that you can build on the fitness and things like that, but what maybe you see the challenges in the future. Just want to talk about your experiences from a couple of years ago. For people who don't know the geography of Liverpool City Centre, you work at the Liverpool Echo, the office is there, you can walk down to the waterfront within 2 minutes, you've got the live building and the Albert Dock, and you talked about you used to find a little spot where you used to go to. Just explain what that spot was, where it was, and what it meant to you.
So basically, it was a fair way out. It was after I'd felt anxious or felt depressed, or I'd had an argument with somebody. I'd walk past the live buildings, I'd walk past the arena. So this is going into like a 15-20 minute walk by now, and I'd say probably about a half-hour walk, or it certainly took me about half an hour to walk. I get to this little spot by the marina. It's sort of enclosed away. It's a bit of a cul-de-sac. There's a few nice little benches there that just look out onto Wirral. And I used to just sit there basically and collect my thoughts. You'd hear the waves thrashing against the rocks and that sort of thing. And I felt like I could sort of wallow there because I was on my own. Nobody would disturb me. My phone would be off, so no one could get in contact with me. I would turn it off, put it onto airplane mode or whatever. And I'd just sort of sit there for sometimes hours, to be honest, in the rain maybe sometimes in the sunshine, and just, think about me and to be honest, berate myself. It was an exercise in self-flagellation. It was me telling myself how useless I was and how I didn't deserve to be here and how no one would miss me if I wasn't here. And that sort of thing. So, it's such a lovely spot. I feel bad putting negative connotations on it. It's not negative anymore because that's where I run past, and it sort of reminds me of what certainly how low I used to be. But at the same time, it is a lovely spot, but it's quite secluded, and it was just somewhere that I felt that I could sort of sit and just disappear for a while.
You've used a word there, which I don't know if you realise you used it when you said it, but you used the word to wallow.
Mm.
And I think when you think about, sitting on a bench by the Mersey, looking out over to the Wirral, people wouldn't necessarily associate that with wallowing. What were you wallowing in?
Just self-hate, I suppose. That feeling that whatever you're doing is not good enough for people. That no matter, as you said, I work at the Liverpool Echo. I write about football, and you'd write an article and you see a couple of negative comments, and then you just tell yourself, oh well, I'm not good enough to be what I am. I'm a fraud. I shouldn't be in this position that I am, and I shouldn't be doing this sort of thing. So I suppose the wallowing would just be that sort of telling yourself that you are not worthwhile to anybody or anything, which I obviously know now is couldn't be further from the truth. But at the time, it's hard to describe, I suppose. But when you've got anxiety and certainly depression, you struggle to see reason. You struggle to think logically. All logic goes out of the window. It's just you've got this one-track mind, and no one can shake you out of it. And because I was there, because very few people walking past, I could just sit there and feed into that feeling and feel into those emotions. And I wouldn't say I was happy doing it, but it was almost like a self-perpetuating myth where I tell myself that, so it must be true.
And then, of course, people, if they go down to a nice spot like they're at banks of the River Mersey, they sit there, they enjoy themselves, and then after an hour or a couple of hours, they walk away. But from what you're saying there, you were going there for almost like a sense of punishment. How did you feel when you got up and walk away? Or was it a case of, I can't sit here forever, I'm going to have to get up?
Yeah, it was I can't sit here forever, My girlfriend would be worried about me, or my family, or my friends, or, it was getting dark and, I needed me tea. Something as simple as that. It'd be a case of, it's time to maybe, try and snap out of it. And sometimes it will end with me reasoning with myself, okay, you're being a bit foolish here, or, you can't stay here forever. Don't get me wrong, when I was sitting there, sometimes I felt like carrying on the walk. And it's funny, when I eventually did start running, and I sort of run past the part where I used to sit, and I was like, oh, right, that's what's here. I didn't realise it was Osserspool Prom and things like that. Brunswick Dock and places like that. But I used to, contemplate going further. And, as I said in the article, sometimes I used to contemplate, it's not very nice to say, but I used to contemplate, jumping in. I know that sounds very dramatic, but sometimes you just think, oh, well, what if you could just sort of float away down the Mersey and no one will ever know that you were gone.
That's a dark place to be, isn't it? Did you feel like it was a dark place at the time, or was that just part of your sort of, because it was such a natural thing for you to do, to travel down to that spot and to sit there, actually have those dark thoughts there was probably just in your mind where that was the right place to have those thoughts.
Yeah, I think that was the nadir in terms of it also was the low point in the sense that I think maybe I had them thoughts one too many times. It wasn't a frequent thought necessarily. It was just sometimes I would sit there and I'd be frozen thinking, whether I was genuinely contemplating, I don't know, whether I was just sort of trying to get myself out of the mentality and say, no, why would you do that? Of course you're important to people. And I think eventually maybe I asked myself one too many times, and I think that was the moment where I realised, Kristian, what are you doing here? You've got to sort of snap out of this, and you've got a problem. I've been told by a couple of people before that, they thought I was suffering from mental health issues, and I think it's that machismo, isn't it? That there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just get a bit down now and then. But I think eventually I realised that I did need help. I did need to talk about it, and I needed to seek some sort of help.
What had people seen in you? Because I know you've spoken in the past about how you go into it, you'd be a laugh, you'd have a joke, you'd be part of the office banter that was going on and things like that. But what do you think that were there a couple of like chinks in the armour that you'd let through, if you like? Yeah,
definitely. I think I was very I still am, but I was very reactive. I was very short-tempered. Sometimes my mood would just flick like a switch. So there would be days where maybe I'd go into work, and I don't know if colleagues noticed it or not. Why would they at the end of the day? But because everyone has those sorts of days, I don't know if friends and family noticed it, but I knew inside there'd be days where I just wouldn't be as talkative as I was sometimes. Sometimes I just didn't. I'd go home early, or just try and avoid the situation, because I suppose I was embarrassed in a way at the time, feeling the way I felt, because I didn't feel that many other people shared those sorts of feelings and emotions. Obviously, I've looked into it now, and I've read around the subject a lot and realised that it's a lot more common than you would think. I think it's 1 in 4 people will suffer from some sort of mental health problem. So it's I suppose when I came out, if you will, and told people, I think maybe people would have again gone, oh, right, okay, yeah, that makes sense now. But I suppose if you weren't to know, you wouldn't. And I think that's the scary and dangerous thing sometimes, and I think that's why it is important for people to always ask if you've got any sort of inkling, or indeed if you feel like that, it's important to just say something, because you can hide it really well. And I used to hide behind the facade of it was jovial, I was laughing. I'd take the mick out of myself a lot. I'd be very self-deprecating. I'd sort of skip my own weight, if that makes sense, because I'd sort of be like the jovial fat lad sort of thing, and I think that was sort of a defence mechanism. And so why would people, I suppose, realise that deep down it was something that was really upsetting me? How many of the factors in your life, Kristian, at the time were sort of played into those negative thoughts? You talked about your physicality, but also your moods through work, and how that was starting to have its impact. Plus, then the work you were doing was sometimes getting a negative reaction as well. So you'd have people, as you say, making a joke of you in the street because of your physicality, but then also your intellectual property, if you like, the stuff you put out there as in who you are, how you write, what you do for a living, was also being skitted and taken the mick of, or questioned in terms of the authority. That's a pretty damning thing, isn't it? That what you look like and also how you put yourself across in the public, both of those things were under threat. Yeah, definitely. I mean, social media, I can't say enough good things about it, to be honest, especially since I posted my article, and I raised over £2,000 for my charity, and so many of them were from I don't like to use this term, but strangers, people I haven't actually met in person, from Twitter and from Facebook, who just felt compelled by my story and felt that it was something that they wanted to help with. But at the same time, there is a lot of negativity around social media, and sometimes it just be, I mean, it's a point. I suppose with my job, Twitter is part and parcel of it now. If you do a story, you've got to tweet it out. You've got to engage with people. You have to talk. If someone asks you a question, a lot of the time you feel duty bound to respond. So you can't just switch off from that. As much as I try sometimes, I'd delete the app from my phone. But there would be times when you write a story and it wouldn't be something that someone would like, or it wouldn't be fans of other football clubs would get onto it, and then they start piling in. And as you say, it's the intellectual idea that people didn't like it. That's fine. It's I try and take pride in my work, but if you don't agree with what I'm saying, that's fine. If you don't even think I'm a good writer, okay, fair enough. It would then become sort of personal. It would be you're fat so and so, and or you're ugly, you're bald, and I don't think people realise it's because the cloak of anonymity is such a dangerous thing on the internet. And these people didn't have avatars, pictures of themselves. They wouldn't be necessarily have the real names or anything like that, but they would just type 140 characters and press send and wouldn't realise the impact it would have on someone. Whereas, every character I read sort of, I'd overanalyse, I'd sort of, it would really get to me. And really upset me. And so there would be sometimes I'd spend nights on the couch just going through the streams with with abuse that I get sometimes, and just sort of sob, you know what I mean? Because it was so, you just feel so worthless, and you just think, why would people be so mean, just because of what you've written.
What was it that made you read those things? Because, as you say, you deleted it from time to time, and some people might say, well, we'll just turn it off then, just ignore it, or just think, well, half of this is going to be abuse, so I'm just not going to look at it. Was there a part of it, you talked about your self-flagellation before, that you almost did it as like a self-punishment? Was there an element of that maybe?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I think, I think at one point I typed into the search engine, Kristian Walsh fat, and just sort of because, people who didn't necessarily at me, so even though I wasn't tagged, I still sought out what people were saying just by typing my name, if you see what I mean. So they weren't saying it directly to me, but I still wanted to know if people were having a go at me and mocking me, without bringing me into the equation. And sadly they were. There was horrible tweets saying, oh my goodness, how fast is Kristian Walsh, and things like that, or what an idiot he is, and obviously things we can't repeat on daytime radio. So I think it was a bit of self-flagellation. I definitely do think it was that. There's good to Twitter as well. That's the thing. It's also, you don't want to miss a story. You don't want to sort of miss a conversation that's happening. You don't want to be in the cold, if you see what I mean. About if there's a fast-moving story, you'd always want to, see how people are reacting and what the general groundswell is on Twitter. But naturally and inevitably, it crossed over. So I had to, I sort of had to take the rough with the smooth. And as I say, there's a lot of good people on Twitter, a lot of good friends on Twitter as well. But at the same time, just some of the comments were just unreal, really. I look back at them now and I think, well, that's what a sad existence you live. But then you just wonder why they're doing it, and you don't know the stories behind that either. So you just sort of shrug your shoulders and get on with it.
Radio City Talk. Tackling the stigma.
We're discussing today the story of Kristian Walsh. He's a local journalist and he's battled with depression and anxiety. He decided to write about this after an incredible weight loss as well. And he's 10 stone down.
It's nearly 10 stone, yeah.
I wanted to ask you about this sort of this issue that you might face now, and then people who might see you in the street or might see you on through social media or via the Facebook live feed that we've got, they might think, oh, you look like normal-sized bloke now. I wonder, is there anything in the back of your mind, bearing in mind what you've gone on in the last 2 years, there's something in the back of your mind thinking, well, I used weight loss as a means of tackling the mental health issues. Is there something that makes you think, what's going to happen now that the weight loss is not something I can continue to do? Because at the moment you look fit, you look healthy. I presume you don't want to lose that much more weight, so you can obviously do shaping. But do you think, is it about fitness now, maybe, or do you continue the sort of the physical change? Is that part of your recovery, do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I don't ever want to become sort of Joe Wixley in 15 in terms of get absolutely hench or anything like that. I think that might be the next step in terms of lifting a few weights.
That word was hench, by the way. GNCA. Right, I'll just write that down.
It's something I'll never be. But it is one of those things that I do feel that, you know, as I said before, I do still get dark days, and I'm mindful not to. I can't lose another 10 stone. You know, I'm sort of under 13 now, and I suppose it's just a case of focusing on me running. I think I'm doing half marathon in April, the Liverpool one, which, you know, to bring it all back, we run past the marina for the last 4 miles, which will be nice. There's a couple of 10Ks coming up, and I think what I'm doing now is I am eating a lot more. I'm not running to diet. I'm just running to maintain my fitness. I've, you know, got one of those Fitbits for Christmas. I'm sure other heart monitors are available, but I got one of those to, you know, look after myself and make sure that my heart rate's right, and I'm just living a healthy life, really, because I do believe sort of healthy body, healthy mind. I am mindful that, you know, I can't go too obsessive. I was very obsessive at the start. You know, I'm sure a lot of people would sort of say, a lot of dietitians, a lot of qualified people would say what I did was you know, borderline dangerous. To be honest, I wasn't eating a lot at all. I sort of misinterpreted the ideas of calories in, calories out. So I was actually eating far less than I should have done. That was sort of ignorance on my part. I thought that you only lost, I think it's normally about 2,000 calories you're meant to intake a day, but that's without exercise. But I was exercising every day, and I was trying to limit myself to about 1,000 calories a day. So if you think about, I was maybe shedding 1,000 calories in terms of exercise, and then I'm allowed 2,000 to be healthy. I was in a 2,000 calorie deficit per day. So it wasn't a surprise really that within 3 months I'd lost 5 stone. You know, and my skin was saggy, and I was just sort of feeling a bit weak, a bit lightheaded. So after that happened, I just started to slow it down a little bit. But I mean, I think the main thing I did is I educated myself beforehand. I've tried to diet before. I'm 30 soon, and I've always struggled with my weight from a very, very young age. And I've always been on diets, and you know, I'd have a month of losing a stone maybe, and then it just all piled back on. I think what I did this time was educating myself about, you know, exactly what is good for you, what is bad for you. And, you know, it's not all just about starving yourself. It's about eating the right foods. You know, fats aren't necessarily bad. There are good fats, there are bad fats, there are good carbs, there are bad carbs. And just educating myself on all of that meant that I approached it with a much more clinical mind than anything else.
When you look at any kind of support networks that exist for people with mental health issues, one of the very, very first things that come up, whether it's through the NHS, through CAM services or whatever, is about exercise, isn't it? It's one of the very first things that you see, and it doesn't cost sometimes anything to get out and go for a run, go for a walk, to stop eating certain things, become a little bit more healthy. Was there something in your mind which made you think, that's the first thing I've read, that's what I'll try first? Or did you think, I'll give this a go with a view to maybe trying some other things? Or do you think that maybe because you've gone through the exercise process, you might also feel that in the future you might try some alternative methods as well? The exercise for you has worked. You've got the very first thing that they suggest is working for you at the moment. Does that give you a sense of relief, or do you think that there might be a time where you might look at alternative treatments that might exist?
I mean, I suppose there was an alternative reality where, you know, I suppose I started this diet last summer. Well, this health change is not a diet; it's more of a, you know, a complete lifestyle change. And it doesn't work for me. You know, in 2 months' time, I sort of lose a couple of pounds, and then I get, as would usually happen, get frustrated, eat, and then, you know, put on even more weight. I feel there was a moment where I think it was always going to be exercise for me, just because I think there was a couple of incidents in terms of I was trying to buy clothes, I was trying to buy, you know, pants for work and things like that, and it was getting to the point where normal shops were not stocking what I needed. And I think that was the moment where I sat back and thought, I can't be living, you know, because I'd like to, I've always tried to dress stylish, and people were really surprised when I said that I was 22 stone, early 22 stone, because they said I hid it well. You know, I didn't sort of let it affect me. Never was, you know, grey sweatpants or anything like that, if you want to use the old sort of cliches. But I knew deep down that, you know, it was going to, A, cost me a lot more money, because when you've got to order bespoke clothes, it costs you a lot more money, and B, I couldn't wear the clothes that I wanted to wear anymore. So it was always going to be exercise for me. And I was just, fortunate. It's luck and genetics as much as anything. I feel, I've always blamed my metabolism, for the size that I was. I'm sure it's still. I don't think it's 100% right because there, even now, for example, over Christmas, I eat a fair bit, and then I just put on a stone, and then I've got to work back hard to. So that means that I'm always focused. I don't think I'll ever sort of revert back to type, but what that also means is, I could see me, doing other alternatives. So I could see myself, I don't know, taking up something else. It'll always maybe be related to exercise. Maybe a bit of biking. I don't even know how to ride a bike, to be honest. So I need to learn that. My dad never taught me when I was growing up. So I'm a bit too old for stabilisers now, I suppose. Swimming, I'd like to take up swimming a little bit. I think it'll always be linked to exercise, just because that's what clears my mind and makes me feel good.
Have you got any flags that go up or go off when you have dark days, or is there a moment, might be a physical reaction that you have to something, or just maybe how you feel on any given day that makes you think, right, now's a good time to maybe go for a run, try and clear my head a little bit, or right, I've dropped into a couple of bad habits, I'm going down a path here. Have you got things that flag up for you?
Yeah, I suppose it's just anger, that overwhelming feeling of clamming up, and again that's sort of that voice in the back of your mind saying you are worthless, you are not, you're a fraud. I mean, even on the back of writing the article, I mean, this all stemmed from when I did the 10k for the Whittle 10k back in September, and people shared my story then, and I got the opportunity to sort of expand on that in the paper. Even after that, there's been a couple of days, and that sort of fed into me, because I've sort of gone, well, everyone's congratulating you, but you're a fraud, aren't you? You're not. You don't deserve all this praise, because look at you now, you're feeling really sorry for yourself, and you haven't turned your life around, and you're doing this and you're doing that. You're not the person that you've made yourself out to be in this article, and that's ridiculous, because I'm perfectly open in that article and say I still get me dark days, and I'm admitting here that I still get me dark days, most definitely. They are fewer and far between though, much fewer and far between. So it's just that that nagging voice, that feeling of being overwhelmed by this feeling, and once sometimes it does get on top of you, and I just do throw myself in bed still, but a lot more times now I'll sort of get on me shorts and my shirt and just get on my trainers and just go for, even if it's just a 7 km run, which is about 4.5-5 miles, just to listen to a bit of music, just to sweat it out a little bit, and just to clear the air.
Have you ever caught yourself feeling happy outside of the guy who used to have a bit of a joke in the office? People talk about the dark times, and sometimes we don't always focus on the fact that you can then have maybe happy times you suddenly realise that you've been enjoying yourself for a couple of hours or even 25 minutes, and you thought, oh, hang on a minute, I'm quite happy here, I feel quite content with myself. Do you get those feelings?
Yeah, with friends, family, loved ones, that happens, and I suppose the normality of it comes when I don't think like that, in terms of it just is. I am happy, and I'll maybe think back, I've been on a night out, or been in the theatre, or just sat on the couch watching TV with my missus, or anything like that, and you don't even think twice. You just go, oh, that was nice yesterday, wasn't it? That's the sort of, you don't have to feel that you've got to justify being happy. They're the good days, if you see what I mean. I do. I try and always look at a positive slant now. Sometimes it isn't possible, and sometimes I do focus on the negatives a little bit too much still. But yeah, it's nice to look back and say, yeah, that was unbridled joy, if you will. That wasn't even being happy because you're trying to force yourself to be happy, because you've made yourself run around, the docks for a little while. It's just, you're happy because, you're surrounded by people who love you and care about you, and will say nice things about you. Do
you have plans for the next year or so? Have you considered sort of best case scenario, worst case scenario of where you might go in the next year or two?
Just to maintain, really, in terms of weight, just to maintain, I'd say just maybe bulk up a little bit, because it's natural. Lost nearly 10 stone. I've got a little bit of loose skin, and it's just, it is what it is. It needs to be toned up a little bit. And as cheesy as it sounds, the the stuff that when I first went there, tried to get sponsorship for Mind, and obviously since the Echo and with this today as well, it's just about raising awareness, because I was absolutely blown away by the number of people who responded to me and confided in me, and people I've met, people I haven't met, would they'd either say, well done, really proud of you, which was so humbling. I had so many people in work coming up to me and saying, well done, and it's nice to know that they don't feel embarrassed. Why should they? But that was always in the back of your mind, saying, oh, will they feel embarrassed? Will they be, will it be awkward when they see me in work and whatnot? But it wasn't. It was fine. And then, as I say, strangers, just dropping me messages, just going, what you said really struck a chord with me. And, I've had a couple of people, obviously I'd never ever reveal names or anything, people I don't know, just saying, thank you so much for what you said. You made me realise that I need to maybe look for help. So, if I can, I've got a lot on my plate in terms of, I've obviously got a job to keep and all that, but if I can just even raise awareness that little bit more, I'd be delighted with that, to be honest.
And so brilliant that those people are saying that to you anonymously or otherwise through social media, when actually that was, on the other side of it, was one of the real issues that you faced, that people will contact you, anonymously, but to criticise you for what you'd written or how you looked or whatever it is. So it's interesting that those two have mirrored each other. Just tell us about Mind. Do you remember the first time you went on their website? Was there something you searched for, or
just mental health? I'd seen a couple of leaflets and a couple of advertisements, maybe on the tube down in London. Funnily enough, just that sort of advertising that sort of just sticks in the back of your mind, very covert. And I just got onto the website, and there was blogs from people, and it lists all the the mental health problems that people can suffer from, and just makes you realise that you're not alone. In terms of, I honestly felt when I was feeling the way I felt that I was strange, I was weird, I was someone who, there was something wrong with me, basically. The term illness is thrown out a lot about mental health, and I'm conflicted with that, because I do feel it is an illness in the sense that you can't help it. It's just like a physical illness, it's something that just comes across to you, and there's nothing you can do about that. But at the same time, I don't think there is a cure. I don't think it's anything to recoil at. If you talk about illness, someone's got the flu, you take a step back. I think if someone's got a mental health problem, you don't have to do that. You should come closer to them, if anything. But
did you feel that thing that you'd go, hey, that's me, that is? So you'd read something and you go, oh, that's me.
Most definitely.
Oh, yeah, that's me.
Most definitely. Depression, anxiety. You'd read all those sorts of stories, and about how people would, lock themselves in the room, or they wouldn't want to go out, or they'd struggle to get into work in the morning. And I'd read that and I go, well, yeah, that's exactly how I feel. And it just gave me a real sort of sense of, well, okay, this is what it is. I need to help myself, because I went through the NHS and they're so stretched. There's not enough for me. There's not enough funding put into mental health. I know you had Luciana on your first show, and she was the shadow cabinet minister for health, and it'd be good if a role like that would actually become a part of the government, and actually someone looks after that, because it definitely needs more funding, it definitely needs more attention. So I've got no problem with the NHS and the process I went through. It just didn't help me. So once I turned to Mind, and I know a lot of other people might sort of get frustrated with the help that they're sent to by the GP. Once I went to Mind, it was just sort of that self-help, in terms of, you realise that these people have come out of the darkness and managed to get better, and so can you.
Absolutely. And I hope just by listening to you, then people might find echoes of their own stories within your story, and then in hearing your story, they might try one or two things that might take them down different paths. They might find, as you did, that certain things didn't work, but other things did. And I think if we hear enough stories, eventually everyone will find, little bits that they can take and grab from each person that can hopefully sort of put many more people on a different path. Kristian, thank you for your time today. Really appreciate you coming on board with the show. Thank you for telling us your story. And if people want to contact us, share their own thoughts on what they've heard today, or their own battles, then do drop me an email, mick@radiocity.co.uk. That's mick@radiocity.co.uk. Kristian, great to see you. We wish you all the best, and we'll catch up with you again, hopefully very soon.
Thank you very much.
Mental Health Monday on Radio City Talk.
Radio City Talks Mental Health Monday with Mick Coyle.